Tonight, I'm joined by a man who has at times inspired me, at times he has mystified me, and at times he has downright terrified me. I'm proud to have on the show this evening my good friend, my colleague, my partner in crime through the remote viewing journey, Edward Riordan. Edward, how are you, my friend?
Dennis, I'm doing great, man. It's good to be
Oh,
on your podcast, and yeah, man, this is going to be good. I'm feeling this is going to
yeah,
be a good one.
it always is. We've got a great history, together. I started this journey really thanks to you. You put out a incredible target through YouTube, and I reached out to you randomly, and we connected, and kind of the rest is history. So I'm forever grateful for that experience.
Yeah, I think that was the QAnon ones. I think
It it was it that target is still hurting my brain. That comes back quite regularly. I think about that one.
that was a heavy lifter there.
It was, and
That
I don't
was a
want to get
weighty
ahead of
one.
ourselves, but that
Okay.
that thread, which I maybe depending on your comfort level, and you're good at redirecting me if I probe too hard, but that thread seems to come up in some of your sessions consistently. It's like that signal's just screaming at you. Uh, so
It
it's a
is. Yeah,
fascinating thing.
it really is. It's like I think you can see with all of us, with myself, with you, with Dick and Daz and Nyiam, that we all kind of have a certain theme, I guess, that has driven us to
Yeah.
be here. And so yeah, that one is definitely a big one for me, and it just keeps unfolding. It's kind of like remembering the future, and
Yeah.
and documenting it, and being in the right place to get from a remote viewing standpoint to get the proper targeting to allow for it to kind of give it a place to go, you know. So
I I just wrote something. I just wrote that down, remembering the future, because I want to come back to that and probably in the second half of our conversation. That's a powerful statement right there. I think that speaks to some of what it is that you do. But before we get into all the heavy stuff, those to those watching again, welcome to the Future Forecast podcast. This is our third episode here. I know we just launched it last week, having a lot of fun with it. We have some great conversations that are lined up, and I think this is going out actually in the public sector as well through Twitter, through YouTube. I think, and we might even eventually put this out there just in the podcast streaming platforms. I think that's our goal eventually. But for those of you that are not familiar with kind of our background and what we are the Future Forecasting Group. We're formerly of Cryptoviewing, and we work with remote viewers, Edward being one of them, who gather information through a structured, intuitive process. And all I can say is go look at what's out there publicly on YouTube and then check us out at futureforecasting.com. Edward says it all the time. We do good work. It's incredible work. It's valuable work with remote viewing, and it's validating work. It's work. If you're skeptical about remote viewing, this isn't all. We do our mysteries targets, which are a lot of fun, but we also have a ton of documented, verifiable targets. Edward, if you want to talk a little bit about just kind of what the team does.
what is important to me and very valuable with the work that we do is that um, we we do important work, and that is what keeps me here. If we weren't doing important work, I wouldn't even want to be here on the
Mhm.
team, you know, uh, because that's the driver. That's a big driver, and we have been doing important work since day one,
Yeah.
and in my opinion, it that's intensifying. So it's like we're kind of getting closer to what it is that we're all remote viewing towards, you
Yeah.
know, and I my strong feeling is that we'll get to a point where it all makes sense, you know. what we've been doing for the past 5 years. Yeah, and then even longer. But as a group for the past 5 years, and
Yeah,
so yeah, it's intense.
it's weird. I had an emotional moment tonight. Wasn't even thinking about what we're talking about now, but it was about all these little intuitive things where it's leading. Um, and I broke down. It was just one of those moments like you just felt like, wow, everything, I can't quite see it yet, but you see it beginning to coalesce. And it's like, wow, there really is meaning behind everything. And I think everybody on the team, we all have our own personal journeys, and then we've created this collective journey as well.
Yeah.
Each are equally significant, to everybody involved. Um, but like Edward said, it's important work that we do, and for those of you that are curious about it, again, I recommend starting with if you're skeptical, the world event sessions, which they're just fascinating to watch. Every month, the team will call out the headlines that are going to be in the news in the upcoming month, and each and every month, their predictions come true time and again. And it's hard to wrap your head around it if this is something that you're new to. And like, wow, they can see the future intentionally and write it down and tell us about it. It's a fascinating thing.
Yeah, and what else is pretty great about it is that by being on, with a team,
Mm-hmm.
uh, we are continually being prompted to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas if we weren't if we didn't have the team, we would all be remote viewing and doing our work, but we may not be that disciplined to do future events every single
Right.
month.
Right.
And so it's kind of like uh, we're making a point of making sure that we do it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Accountability.
yeah, and it's like it needs to be done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it kind of depends on how you want to look at it, because like some people can look at it like, let's see if those guys can really predict a future event for
Mm-hmm.
next month, and maybe they may be impressed by something or skeptical about something or along those lines. But from my point of view of it, isn't like that at all. It's not about getting hits and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's more about the continued working of being in that space continually over
Yeah.
and over and over again, um, and because what we're doing is it's important. I mean that word is going to come up a lot,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's it's how I feel. And so doing it every month is important for us to do it every month. It's got a real good place,
Yeah. Well, and you're refining the process every month. You guys are pushing your boundaries. You're expanding really what remote viewing is and what it can do. With the successes and failures shown publicly. When we mess up, we put it out there. We talk about it because I think years from now there will be a lot of things people can learn from. Maybe even more so from the things that didn't work so well. I think that's
Absolutely.
valuable information as well. When we're like, oh, that didn't work. That tasking didn't work that way, or this target didn't work, or just had an off day. But there's a lot of good value. And it's not just the
Yeah.
world events. We've looked at the fun ones are the mystery targets, obviously what we call the woo targets. It could be anything from UFOs to Edward's favorite Sasquatch. Um, and then we look at political stuff. We look at cryptocurrencies, the financial stability of the world. I mean, there's a lot of things with information that we gather that has proven valuable, which brings us to the topic we're going to start with tonight. I'd like to start talking about what Edward initially called his ominous feeling. For those of you that follow Edward's work, he got a feeling, a ping from the psychic ether back in November 2017, and it gave him an
That's correct.
indication of something that was coming. And that something did come, and it shut the world down several years after he got that impression. But the part two to this discussion, or the part two to that part of the discussion, I should say, is he started to get more data in a session we did the beginning of August that is already starting to appear in the headlines related to this. So I'm going to turn it over to Edward for a minute. If you want to just take us back to that ominous feeling, if that's okay, just to give a recap for those that might not be familiar with it.
Yeah. It was August. No, it was November of
November.
2017.
Yeah.
And right in this room, right in this room, where I'm sitting right now, right here, um, some strange feeling went through me, and noticeably where I was like, what just happened? What was that? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And it was strong enough to um, have an impact on me. And I decided to use remote viewing to see what was it about? What was that?
Yeah.
And when I look back at it now, I'm just glad that I did. I'm glad that I took the effort, because I could have easily have said, "Wow, that was weird. Time I got to go to work,"
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yeah.
and could have missed it. And but luckily, I sat down and put a lot of effort into it, and then published it. I
Yep.
I videotaped everything and put it up right away. And it was just like you were saying, having the guts to put something out like that.
Yeah.
Because you got no feedback for it. People could say you're crazy. This doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make any sense. But it was about right away. First page uh, was something going through the veins,
Yeah.
some kind of fibrous thing. It was a virus, and then all the rest of the details came through in 6 or 7 sessions or whatever, of the lab, where it came out of, where
Yeah.
that was located, what was around it, the location near the lab where they would pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're saying, the wet market or whatever was right in the same
Yeah.
town. Right down the,
Yeah.
and so that was in there. Um,
The
and just
scientist was, the mad scientist in there
the
too.
mads, yeah, that's really the part that still hasn't really come to
Mm-hmm.
final fruition yet,
Yeah.
and if ever. But but it was one of those things where I had to wait 2 years for any kind of feedback on it, because it was just, I did them, I put them up, and then it's always on to the next thing, you know,
Right.
on to
Right.
the
Yeah.
next
You
the
move on
next
quickly.
targets, the next
Yeah.
targets, the next videos or whatever. And so when that situation happened, in about 2 years later, I'd
Yeah.
say November of 2019 is where
Yep.
news started coming out about it. Hey, there's a
Mm-hmm.
problem going on in China. And so it was like, wow, man, that's uh-oh, we'll see what happens. So then when it actually hit and some information came back, and I could look back at it and say, well, yeah, there it is. But this was the thing, though, Dennis, was that I was getting some pushback on it, because people were saying, hey, man, this is a spike protein. Doesn't look like what you drew. You had all these fiber things. So
Mm-hmm.
that feedback took me about another year and a half
Yeah.
before that feedback came in. And when that feedback came in, and I'm sad it happened. I wish it never happened.
Right.
I'd be more than happy to say, it was a total bomb. I missed it. But that feedback did come in the clots.
Yeah.
And I had that in the blood. It was fibrous.
You drew like
Um,
these they look like little worms in a tube,
mhm,
is what you were
yeah,
drawing on there.
exactly. And those were in the blood vessel.
Yeah.
Those were inside of a
Yep.
blood vessel. So that was almost 4 years later to get that kind of feedback.
Right.
And so it was one of those things where I could pat myself on the back and say, "Oh, everybody, look at me! Aren't I so great? I'm such
Right.
a great remote viewer." But I don't think that way at all. It's
You don't.
more, I'm glad I did it because it was important,
Mm-hmm.
and because I'm kind of lazy. I mean, I'll sit and watch YouTube, you know, but I could be doing something else. I can be pretty lazy,
Right.
and I'm glad I was not lazy in those moments to put out what I needed to put out. It was like, several times in sessions, there were big targets for me, not either with future forecasting or without, outside of that, where
Hmm.
it's like, you know, I needed to do that. You know, this was important, and it was like I was. It was like somewhere in the far beyond said, would you do this?
Yeah.
Would you do this for us? And I say, yeah, I'll do it, and I do it.
Right.
And then afterwards, again, it's not the ain't I so great? It's more like, man, am I glad I did that? You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. One of the things I can say about you is that there's no ego with you. I mean, that was one of the earliest things you told me about remote viewing back before I even started to train with Daz. It was, remote viewing will chew you up and spit you out, and it'll destroy your ego because you can't have an ego on remote viewing. You have to be comfortable with your failures. You have to be ready to put that stuff out there and recognize every aspect of it as a learning piece to this journey. And you are so dedicated to this craft beyond your natural ability, just the craft itself and learning. Even I've never, maybe once, have you had a target where you're like, nah, I don't like that one. Like it could be just a random target, and you're like, man, that was an interesting target. I really liked, but then you describe just the process that you go through. You truly just love what you're doing. What I'm curious about, you said a few things that really make me wonder, and I don't know if you even know this, but like, where did this signal come from? And what are the chances that you're like, oh, I am going to explore this? I mean, that does seem like it's something significant there.
You mean like with the ominous one, or just in general?
It was talking about the ominous feeling. I mean, any idea where that came from? And do you think it's significant that you chose to take that and run with it the way you did?
I mean, looking back and um, trying to wrap my head around it, or find an answer like that. Um, I, it seemed um, like the plan was hatched,
Yeah.
or um, they really meant it, or something like
Right.
that. And it just like sent out this kind of shockwave, or
Yeah.
maybe they set the date or whatever,
Right.
and and it sent out like kind of a shockwave, because that's what it felt like,
Right.
you of something that was kind of diabolical, not just like a normal thing, a big thing, something that was going to affect everybody, you
Right.
know. And so I kind of look at it that way. Or if it wasn't something like that, then it was just an episode on the timeline that said, I got to do this now, you
Yeah.
know. So I don't, I just don't know. Could be any of those
Yeah.
things or none of them. I mean, I just don't know.
It's curious. And in looking at some of the world events things, we've had conversations with the other members of the team. And sometimes, I know Daz has reported if he does world events earlier in the month, it's not always as accurate because it seems that the future might be still fluid or stop trying to shape. I mean, these are things we're speculating we know nothing about at this point in time. Yet something like this was so significant, so impactful, it sent ripples out literally through time. And I know we have this impression of time being linear in remote viewing. We know that it's not anything like that at all. But the fact that it rippled in the way that it did and caught your attention, I think in and of itself is fascinating because you weren't tasked that. It just
No,
slapped you one day, just showed up,
it did. Yeah.
you know?
And it was like not a one session thing, it was like
Right.
um it was having a big effect, and it was
Yeah.
like it had to come out,
Hmm.
and the only thing I can say is that if I could say, it was like um what's that term, where something has a large energy, and it uh can make a connection through time. I forget the word it is.
I can't think of it now.
I can't think of it. Entropy.
Oh, yes.
The entropy of it was so strong, um, that maybe that was something to do with it. But
Yeah.
I tend to look at it more in terms of remembering the future,
Yeah.
and because my theory or philosophy is that below the threshold of our awareness, we're geniuses.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that it's below the threshold of awareness, so most people don't know. They don't know it.
Right.
It's
Right.
quote unquote out of their reach.
Right.
Um, but I see it that way, and um, so it could be that that part of me just said, "Now is the time.
Hmm.
I got to do that now. Do it now."
So it could have come just right from you.
It's possible. It's
Yeah.
possible because people ask me, like, with my style of remote viewing that I've developed for myself.
Hmm.
Who are you asking these questions to, man?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like you're asking these questions. Who are you asking? And the answer is I'm asking myself.
Right.
You because I know that below the threshold of awareness is the genius,
Yeah.
and that's the part that, in my opinion, guides us through. You know, like people say, well, suddenly it was like, do I turn left or turn right? And something said, I gotta turn left. Well, who
Right.
said who said turn left? In my opinion, you told yourself to turn left.
Right.
It's that part of you, and that's
Right.
just below the threshold of your awareness,
Right.
and is rather hidden. The hidden
Hmm.
hand guiding the dumb, you know,
Right. It's so
or,
subtle. It can be
yeah.
missed.
Like I like to joke. I say I'm only stupid on the outside.
I like that. I like that. So you've got this signal, 2017, November 2017. It was shortly after that you joined Cryptoview. It was in 2018 when you joined the team, I think.
I joined the team in 2018. They
Yeah.
started in April.
Right.
They started dropping stuff, and I was in contact with them in August. So it
Hmm.
was a couple months after they started,
Yeah.
and they looked at my stuff and said, "Hey, man, would you like to
Yeah.
join the team?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So yeah, it was so yeah, that was when it was August. I think I did my first work with them in September of
Right.
2018. A long time, man. Like,
Yeah.
anniversary.
Yeah. It's coming up.
Yeah,
It's been incredible. And I remember right about a year after that was when we started looking at the release data. And at that point, we didn't connect it to your ominous feeling. We were starting to have those questions. We were starting to look at like, hey, could this be what Edward saw back in November? And I remember one of the ones that stands out for me is when we did the Memorial Day parade. It was in like February, and we looked ahead to Memorial Day. And the target was New York City, the Memorial Day parade, and all we got was empty streets. And it,
yeah,
it didn't make any sense to us trying to figure
yeah,
out, well, we're supposed to see a parade and there's nothing here. Everything is empty.
yeah,
Why? And we come
yeah.
to find out later it was because everybody was inside. It was a lockdown,
That's right. We
you
literally
know?
had empty streets. I remember that
Yeah.
that session. The only thing I remember from that session was there's like buildings, not tall ones, they were smaller ones in my session, and cars, and they're parked, and there was nobody on the street. The
Yeah.
streets were bare, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. They were kind of boring sessions. There really wasn't
yeah,
anything to report at all on it,
yeah. That's the funny
and then,
thing about remote viewing is that uh, it's like if it's a boring set, you got to go with it. There's
right.
always the risk of adding something in because you're like, this is kind of boring, you know.
Right. And that's hard. I mean, that speaks to your experience and discipline as a viewer, I think, to just take that data, whether it's exciting or not, and just record it. And I would assume once you have enough targets under your belt, and you've kind of, I don't want to say seen it all, because I don't think we'll ever see it all, but seen enough, you you lose that need to have the fantastic in everything that you do. It's just going to report what's there, and it's fantastic in and of itself, I would think.
It really is. And
Yeah,
you were going somewhere, and I kind of threw that in there. I didn't mean to cut you off or
that's
change
fine.
directions. Um, but you know, remote viewing is something that once um, a certain amount of effort is done, the experience changes
Mm-hmm.
and becomes something else. And it's very enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
So like you were saying, whatever the target is, I tend to enjoy because I enjoy the
Right.
space. I
Yes.
enjoy the space. And years ago, man, in a lot of the experimental work that I've done, I decided that screw the target, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the target is not important
Right.
because that's what it always was, you know.
Yeah.
All the teachers and all the this and that, the target was always the most important. The target, the target. And so I took the opposite and said the
Right.
target is doesn't mean jack.
Right.
It's the experience.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that matters, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have the right experience, then somebody will be able to look at the target and makes some, get out of it what they
Right.
may need to get out of it. But from
Correct.
my perspective, it's like I don't care, you know.
Right.
I just want to have the experience that I want.
Right.
And it took me a long time to get there, man. It took me a long, painful journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's remote viewing is very trying on a lot of levels. It hits you just in ways you would never expect, I think, in the way you view the world, the way you view yourself, the way you view your own mind and your emotions. Um, but I also think that the way you publicly share your experience, I think it helps people get through. I know it's helped me get through some of those things. Like, well, Edward said this and he's been through this, so it's okay. This is normal, this is natural, and it helps you kind of get over those things. I always am thankful for you putting your work out there like that. I know there's many other people that follow you that do as well.
I'm
It's
really
been,
glad to hear it because that really was the intention
yeah,
was because none of that stuff was out there before.
yeah,
You know, I was like, I started to do it, um, and it was more along the lines of, man, I wish somebody else had done this 10 years
hmm,
ago.
yeah,
Man, I wish I could have seen this stuff 10 years ago. And so that was a big motivating factor. Like, I'm not gonna just focus on these big, uh, shiny object targets
right,
for the glory of it or whatever.
right,
Um, I'm gonna. This is some serious exploration, and you go along with follow along with if you want. I'm going to be the good, the bad, the ugly,
right,
the cheers and the tears.
right, right.
And so yeah, I'm I'm glad for that. I'm glad for that.
I think that's what's great about the team is everybody has their own style, their own approach to it. And when you watch the sessions for those that follow everybody's work, in my opinion, you're learning aspects of remote viewing. You're seeing how people record the data, and you guys talk about the experience in collecting that data. And I know we do have a lot of people that follow that are also training and learning or want to learn. For me, I felt like I've had the honor of sitting through a master class for the last several years, working with all of you guys, just soaking it all in, listening to your process. There's so much value in just that aspect alone and watching you guys because, there's the word important again, but there is so much more that can be done. I mean, right now we're using 4 viewers. to report on everything happening in the world. There's so much more that could be done with remote viewing. And I want to circle back though to this big thread that we're talking about here. You had the ominous feeling, and then you get called into the crypto team, the crypto viewing, and then things start to happen, start to unfold, and we start piecing, and we're getting more targets now. And these targets are specific to what was unfolding in the world, and you're starting to get your feedback. What was going through your mind as this feedback starting to come in?
It it was giving me this sense of, oh, we're finally here,
Yeah.
you know, and um, so it was like, where am I on the timeline?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's that was a big part of it for me, was being able to go, okay, I know where I am in time,
Right. Right.
you know, and that was, even though the event was horrific,
Right.
it was a relief to have that sense. I know where I am in time now,
Yeah.
man.
It's
It's kind of
grounding.
like grounding, and it was just like time. Oh, it's my friend, and and it was kind of like a, okay, man, here we are, here we
Yeah.
are, let's go, baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gloves are off now, you know.
They sure were. They
Yeah.
sure were. So we use that data. I know a lot of members in our community found that data valuable in just preparing, for the possibility of whatever was coming at the point, because everybody was still blind to really what the target was at that point in time. Everything hits. We go through that whole ordeal for a few years. And we're like, okay, that's over with. And then this past August, we were looking at Micah, which was another. Oh, no, we're looking at, was it Micah or bricks? It was Micah.
It
We're
was the
looking at.
Micah
Yeah,
regulations,
yeah,
and
uh,
yeah, that was the target. And in that session, um, there was like a, an event,
yeah,
you know, and it's interesting because when you think of a spike in a tile mist, typically it's this way, you know.
yeah.
This one was this way.
It was down.
It
Yeah, it
wasn't.
was a straight. It was a power. For those that are not watching, he's making a motion with his hand. It was a horizontal line with a sharp dip downwards, and then back up, and then the horizontal line
Yeah,
continued.
yeah.
Downward
I
dip.
didn't even think about that till just now.
Yeah,
Um, but I think it's significant, and so that then became the curious thing.
right.
What's that about? And it was right back in it. This is a health thing. It's a health crisis
Yeah, you called it a national health crisis in Canada.
in Canada. It's specifically Canada,
Right.
and that it's going to have that kind of an effect. You know,
Yeah.
and so it was, and so when we did the debrief and we got the feedback, and it's that Micah regulation thing, you know.
Right.
And what's going through my mind is just like, uh, I don't look at it in terms of, oh man, the target was Micah and I didn't draw everything related to Micah.
Right.
Um, I'm looking at it in terms of how things are interconnected,
Connected. Yep.
you know,
Yep.
and the importance of that. And
Hmm.
that's it's just like this bigger picture of it.
This has to happen in order to pave the way for this event to fall into place.
You got it.
And
Yeah,
that's what
you
you were
got it.
picking up on,
Yeah,
it seems like.
these things are connected.
Hmm.
And and then I started thinking about that, back in 2020, we were working a target, and I was specifically looking for 2020. It was not even like a prompt in the thing, but just like looking at 2023
Yeah.
back in 2020, and it was like 2023 is reminding me of 2020 in a
Yeah.
big way, in a big way.
Yeah.
And So here we are in 2023, and the up until now, I wasn't really seeing that, like in a couple things, you know.
Hmm.
And so, but now it's like, oh yeah, here comes the masks. Oh yeah, here comes the variants in Canada.
Yeah.
They're already ready with the new Ghibli
It just,
Bibbly.
yeah, they just released a new one that's
Yeah,
supposed to be designed specifically for this other one that's out there now.
how convenient is that?
Yeah,
And
the timing is
so
suspect.
it's like, oh, okay, now okay, I know where I'm at in time again, you know.
Hmm.
And so uh, I'm very concerned about it, you
Well,
know.
I think your data and everyone else, because other people had similar data points that were corroborating to what you had. And I think there was also an aspect of it was there'll be a national health thing, but the media scare up, I think, was kind of the driving factor. Is that correct?
This time around, you mean?
Yeah. It sounded like there was a
So
piece there
far,
that was like a scare factor where maybe the event itself isn't as bad as it sounds, but it's going to be used in that capacity.
yeah.
Obviously, we won't be able to verify that until after the fact, but I
You
hold on to
know,
that to stay grounded.
yeah, exactly. You know what was interesting is we did that Micah session, and I did that session. I think it was June 30th
Hmm.
of this year, and in August, sometime in August,
Yeah.
I see this article. Alex Jones's connections or whatever is whistleblowers or whatever is saying the new strain, they're dropping the next virus in September, middle of September, you
Yeah.
know, and it's going to come from Canada.
Wow.
That's what they said.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
holy shit, man. So my joke was, I think Alex Jones's whistleblowers have been looking at my stuff. know,
Oh my gosh. Can you
you
imagine if
know?
that was the loop, Edward?
Oh
Talk
God.
about feeding your inner genius, right?
What the hell? But here it
uh
is, you know, here it is.
yeah.
Now we're hearing it all. It's all kind of happening right now, you know.
Yeah,
Because when I
Reuters
see
just
like,
put something out about it. Yeah, legit.
yeah, Joe Biden has COVID, Whoopi Goldberg, you know, these big people, you know,
Right.
in the TV world,
Right.
and they're all wearing their masks, you know, even though they're in a room by themselves talking through a Zoom meeting
Hmm.
or whatever, they got the
Hmm.
mask on, you know,
Yeah.
the whole prop and propaganda. And
Yeah.
so,
It's trending. I know there's people out there in social media talking about it. I know somebody close to me at her job. She works in the medical field, and everybody's in a panic about it. Oh, because we don't want to wear masks again. We don't go through that again. But this fear is starting to ramp up. In my own circles, I've had people come up to me and be like, What's happening this time? What do you think is going to go on?" Because people are getting nervous, and I'm like, honestly, I'm not even paying attention because I don't want to get myself in that headspace. If I need to
yeah,
know something, it'll come to me. But
right.
there's a lot of fear starting to build up about it.
They're cranking the fear machine back up,
Yeah,
and you know, it's a concern, interesting to watch because
yeah,
it's you know it works, you know,
yeah,
and they know how to do it.
yeah. I mean, we're designed to, or we're built to respond to fear, and these engineers know just how to push those buttons and to make it spread. And then it's literally contagious. That energy spreads. It's
Yeah,
a frequency, a harmonization
yeah,
that people get sucked into. It's everywhere. I
yeah.
remember with the last one with Netflix, within the week of it coming to the US, all of a sudden Netflix is playing all the pandemic movies. You remember that?
I do remember that.
And everybody's getting sucked into it because it was putting them in that level, in that mindset. I mean,
Yeah.
that harmonizes when everybody's on this, has the same focus. There's power in that resonance there.
You know what's interesting, dude? Um, this was in 2019. I think it might have been right after the Vegas thing.
Yeah.
I had to go to Chicago. Maybe it was before that. It doesn't matter. But it was in 2019 before the pandemic started.
Right.
And I had to go to Chicago. So I'm at my sister's house and I'm watching some Netflix. And Netflix had a documentary that just dropped about Bill Gates
Uh-huh.
on how great of a guy he was. I mean, it
Oh,
was like
wow.
he was just the greatest, most compassionate human
Yeah.
being. And so it's just one of those things like, you know, prepping people. You
Yeah.
love Bill Gates is on your side, man.
Yep.
Listen to Bill. He
Yeah.
loves people, you know.
Yeah. There's
And
there's power in that stuff, man. I mean, that's magic. That's really it, it's manipulation. It's all of that.
big time, big
Yeah.
time.
Wow. And here we are today, through that journey. So do you have any thoughts on what things are going to look like in the next upcoming months? Any opinions? That's a loaded
Um,
question, I know.
my opinion is that um, it's we're on the fast track, you
Right.
know, and they're dropping the events on us very quickly,
Yeah.
one after another, with little breaks in between. We've had a little break here
Yeah.
in the past couple of months, and um, in my opinion, that break time is coming to an end,
Hmm.
and then we'll be into the next phase of um, of the unfoldment of what
Right.
the agenda. You know,
Do you have any thoughts on how to best navigate that?
um, kind of what I said before is um, people, need to control their fear.
Yeah.
You know, because that's how they control people.
Uh-huh.
And uh, if for people who don't understand, who don't really understand that, they're susceptible to it.
Yeah.
You know, and for people who do understand it, then it becomes very obvious when they see something's coming down the line.
Yeah.
And so how do you do that? How do you control your?
Right.
We go back to the ice bath thing.
Yep.
Um, it's not about hey, I'm macho, I can be in the cold. It's
Right.
about going into a environment you really don't want to go into. You're terrified to go in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
gonna hurt. It's gonna be so uncomfortable and horrible
Right.
that you could easily convince yourself to not do it.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like, oh, I get it now. It's a discipline.
Yeah. It's finding a focus.
Yeah. And get into that really uncomfortable environment
Right.
and be able to still maintain that.
Yeah.
Maintain it, you know. Uh, in my opinion, that's a really good one because then
Yeah.
you're training yourself for it.
That's because there's some studies and there's some good podcasts out there. I know Andrew Huberman talks a lot about this stuff and the ice baths. And he talks about, it increases your pain tolerance and your resiliency. It really does strengthen that mental muscle, which is from somebody who has handled a lot of crisis, dangerous situations. The ability to stay calm and think clearly when shit is falling apart all around you is a lifesaver, because otherwise you're so hyper focused on the big scary thing in front of you. But if you can step back in that moment because you have that discipline, because you've done that training, and just survey what's going on, you can see the bigger sense and you can sometimes see the strings behind or the orchestration. And you can say, okay, I'm going to sidestep over here, not even go in that direction. That's pulling me like a moth to the flame because it's so big and fantastic to look at.
Totally, totally. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing about the like with the ice bath stuff is that it's like an exercise that doesn't have a negative a PTSD
Yeah.
side effect, you know.
Wish I would have known that years ago. Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
like you're saying, you know, like if somebody's been in crisis situations,
Right.
yes, they know what to do, but they may have taken on some trauma from the thing.
Correct.
And so what this is like a trauma-free,
Yeah.
exercise,
Yeah. You're
and
right.
it's very important to me. Like, it's just like, you know, because it's where we are, man.
I
We're in the new world.
I agree. I think it's important to have some kind of practice or discipline. I mean, I'm a huge fan of meditation. I do it every day, and I think you'll agree with me. It's all part of a process of getting to know your own mind and getting to know what is your own mind, because then you can learn to recognize, like you did at the beginning of this podcast, we talked about it. Oh, that's not coming from me. Where is that coming from? I'm going to follow that and see what I need to do with it. And I think it starts with things like that ice bath and paying attention to that process. What am I feeling physically? What am I experiencing mentally and emotionally? And over time, you really develop a deeper understanding of your own self.
I completely 100% agree. And um, if it's kind of it's sad to me to see people who don't um, understand that or take that on. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
they never find out who they are. You know,
Yeah.
um, for whatever reason, and maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Just by saying that. There's things going on there that I don't understand.
Right.
You um, but it's like the reward is that pursuit.
Yeah.
I'm going to find out who the hell I am.
Yes. The journey. It never ends. And that's okay
Yeah,
because it gives you that drive, that purpose to try new
yeah.
things.
And then it's
You know,
like you were saying, like okay, I want to go put myself in that situation. Well, why are you going to do that? I'm going
right.
to find out who I am.
Yeah.
I'm going to find out
Yep.
who I am by how I react and how I
Yeah.
navigate it or whatever. You
Yep.
know, and
It's like that shamanic journey going out into the wilderness by yourself. The goal there is you're overcoming that fear. And there's, throughout history, a lot of the religious leaders or spiritual leaders, they went through these trials and tribulations of their own accord. When I read these now with the lens I have, it's like, wow, they were just truth seekers. There were people trying to find enlightenment or a deeper understanding, and they were putting themselves through all these things because they understood that there was something in that fear, in conquering that fear, that helps you peel back the veil. And you have to
100%,
put yourself through these things, you know?
100%, yeah. And it's like
Yeah.
when people are initiated into that,
Yeah.
then you see that you're just one in a long line of initiates,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just it separates you out a little bit
Right.
from the masses.
Right.
Um, but it's a pretty damn well worn path
It is.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And that's comforting.
Right. Because at that time you feel alone, right? At first. And then once you start walking, you're like, oh, I'm following in the footsteps. Nobody's told me to do it. I'm just following this path that others have gone through. And then you start to connect, which is another fascinating thing I think about this journey. It's like, they talk about secret societies and that's not what I'm referring to here, but there's a common language, I think, a common way of viewing things and explaining things that you understand. Oh, okay, they've done some of the work here. And
Right,
it's just
right.
there.
My favorite part of it is like, and I'm sure you could attest to it as well in your life, is that without any assistance, like you say, like a secret society, where
Right.
you may have a person at a young age, they join the society, and there's people in there that's, they're going to say, okay, do this and do that, do this and do that.
Right.
They're kind of they're guided along,
Right.
but we're not that way.
Yeah.
It became more of a oh man, I remember in my own life where finally I kicked myself in the ass so hard and said, if I don't start listening and doing what is coming through
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
um, I'm gonna spiral right down the toilet, right down the
Yeah.
drain.
Yeah.
And so I made a decision. Okay, I get it. When that comes in, go and do that. I'm gonna go and do it.
Yeah.
And I actually started to do it.
Yep. Yep.
And what happens then? Your freaking life changes.
Yeah. Because you start getting feedback.
Damn
You get
right.
that validation, and that's
Damn right.
mind blowing. I mean, it's like the
Yeah.
watching someone do world events for the first time. It's that huge
Yeah.
um, of an experience on a personal level because you're following your own voice and you're going, whoa, this really led me somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know,
Then yeah. Then the life becomes a hell of a lot more interesting.
it sure does. You know, it reminds me of that scene, and I cry whenever I see the mashed potatoes scene from Close Encounters. I mean, what
Totally.
a genius in that. Like that is such a part where he's going, this means something to me. And he's molding a pound of mashed potatoes on his dinner plate and he's crying over it. I'm like, yeah, I've been there. You don't understand what the meaning is, but it's your life's quest to understand what this symbol in your mind means. And you push and you
Exactly.
push and you push until you get that breakthrough. It's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And those are the favorite parts of my favorite
Yes.
movies too.
Yeah.
Is where that's why I like it. We probably talked about this before. My favorite part of the movies that I love, my favorite parts are the beginning,
Yeah. Yep.
where the
Yep.
person's wandering around, they don't know what's going on, you
Yeah.
know, and then something happens, and all of a sudden, you can
Yep.
see them start to turn, you know,
Yeah.
and then it begins to unfold, and they become more and more aware.
Yeah.
Those are always my favorite because I can relate to it so much.
Yep, 100%. Yeah,
You
it's
know what
like
I mean?
wow, and it's like the writers obviously have had some experience, because it's a real thing. It's the way it happens. You know, it's
Totally.
different for everybody, but there's that common thread that
Yeah,
runs through it. You know,
absolutely.
wow.
Absolutely.
Well, Edward, I'd like to continue this in a second part and dive a little bit deeper into some other things. If that's
Sure.
okay with you, we can cut this one off here,
Okay.
and we'll move on to diving a little bit deeper. I'd like to talk a little bit, continuing the thread we've been on in terms of we covered some great stuff tonight, but in terms of your ominous feeling, and what we alluded to in the beginning of this conversation was the other thread that you seem to be following, and maybe bring a little AI into the conversation because you have
Oh yeah.
some great thoughts on AI and I do too, and you and I can
Yeah.
we like to
That,
talk about that one, so this will be the space
absolutely.
for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely. That would be
all right.
great.
So that will be episode 4. We're going to record it right now, but I'll see when we're going to release it. It'll be released shortly after this one. So for those of you watching, please weigh in. What are your thoughts? What's your process in finding that discipline in handling your fear as you go through this journey in life? And weigh in on your thoughts too on where things are going in the world. If you've seen Edward's work and his data, what does it all mean? And I'd be curious to hear your opinion on where is it coming from and why? What's the bigger picture? Let's hear what your thoughts are on that. And make sure that you're checking us out. It's at futureforecasting.com. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? I'm nervous now in the spotlight.
Futureforecastinggroup.com.
Thank you. Futureforecastinggroup.com. That's why I have Edward here. Futureforecastinggroup.com. And I'll have it linked on the video anyway. So be sure to check us out. So Edward, always great to talk to you, my friend. I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion in the next part. So thanks so
Thanks
much,
a
my
lot.
friend.
Thanks,
All right.
Dennis.
Yep.